Hello, my name is Davey Jones, and I'm one of the agents at Ag Defense Risk Management in Elgin, Oklahoma. We are an agency with a diverse background in risk management products. And for several years now, we have occasionally done producer meetings over this pasture, rangeland, and forage rainfall index plan of insurance that's offered by federal crop insurance through the USDA and the Risk Management Agency. On occasion, we have been asked if we could record one of those producer meetings and have it available to send it out to other people. And we have yet to do that, but we're recording this video now as an informational piece that can be distributed to people who have farm and ranch operations that would like to look at the PRF in a little more detail and give them a tool to use to understand it better and to decide whether or not it's something that they should implement into their operation. So what we'd like to do, first of all, is just define pasture, rangeland, and forage for you briefly. It's a rainfall index program that is federally subsidized and provides insurance payments for perennial crops, mostly grasses and alfalfa, intended for forage when that geographic location experiences below normal rainfall for specific 2-month time periods, cold intervals, for covered acres and by grid ID. Now that's a mouthful, but we'll break that down just a little bit as we move on through the program. There's 3 questions that producers typically ask when they first encounter this rainfall index insurance policy. First question is, why does this PRF insurance work? Obviously, it's an insurance program, and insurance in most people's thinking equals expense, not income. And so it's a valid question, and there's 3 reasons why we think it's important that you understand why PRF works. First of all, it's practical. And it's practical because it addresses the primary cause of increased cost and lost revenue on most farm and ranch grazing and haying operations. Obviously, there are parts of the country where this isn't true, but in a large portion of the cattle belt, it's lack of rainfall that is the primary culprit for operations that experience difficulty due to weather events. So it's practical because it increases the number one cost. Secondly, it's easy. PRF is the most streamlined and user-friendly of all the federal crop insurance programs in most people's opinion. And we'll talk a little bit more about why it's so easy. But that would be the second reason. And then the third reason, and really the most important reason, is because it's financially beneficial. Why is it financially beneficial? I thought it was insurance. I thought it's supposed to be an expense. Well, actually, the premium subsidies make all the difference. The substantial premium subsidies mean that producers can have a high degree of confidence that the long-term benefits of participating in the program will be significantly higher than the cost of participation. We're going to look at that in a little more detail. We're going to break that out, and that's a pretty big claim to make, but we think that you'll find that it's very much verifiable. So the second question that people have, first question being, why does it work? Second question is, how does it work? Now, obviously, there's a lot of moving parts in any type of insurance program. PRF is no exception. It's not really that complicated, but it gets a little busy. And so what we've done is we've tried to isolate the 5 things that someone new to the concept of rainfall index policies would need to understand to know if they wanted to move forward and participate in the program. So the first of the 5 is that NOAA has a grid ID system, NOAA being the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Association. And this grid ID system divides the nation up into specific grids, longitude and latitude. In most of our area, those grids are going to be from 13 to 15 miles square. This slide was made in Oklahoma, and in most places in Oklahoma, it's around 15 miles square. And then every farm you have is in one of these grids. Now, you may have farms in more than one grid, but every farm will have its grid. And then secondly, each of these grids has its own identification number, and each identification number has a historical record of daily rainfall dating back to 1948, using the exact same procedure for establishing the amount of rain recorded each day. And it draws information from the three closest weather stations and assigns a distance weighted average into that grid every day. The third point is that coverage is allocated in 2-month intervals throughout the covered period. And those intervals are then compared to the historic averages for that interval. If the covered period is less than the percent of normal rainfall that you insured on your policy, and we typically insure 90% of normal rainfall, you can reduce that down to 70, but we typically insure 90%. So if your rainfall for a given interval in a grid is less than 90%, then a loss is paid. And once that loss is determined, they are automatically filed, electronically filed, and the losses are then paid 45 to 60 days following the end of each 2-month interval that's insured on the policy. Premiums are paid first, then losses in excess of the premiums are paid directly to the producer after that. So this becomes a system of receiving regular checks throughout the growing season when you have a prolonged drought, which is very much beneficial to the cash flow of an operation. And then lastly, if the losses have not paid the entirety of the premium by September 1st of the crop year, it's at that point an invoice would be issued on any remaining premium balance that's due. The final payment of that remaining premium is due no later than November 15th following the invoice. So in each of these 5 areas, I want to go right back through and just give kind of a quick visual follow-up to each one. So on the first one, this is a picture of the grids again in Oklahoma, in Comanche County, Oklahoma. And you can see the red grids are the grids that would be identified as being where your acres are located. And then the numbers in each grid are going to be the identification, kind of the thumbprint of that grid. And then on the second point, how the rainfall is measured, if you'll look at the box on the right-hand side, and you'll see in the middle of that box, there's a blue shaded area. So that would be one grid. And the lines that come away from that grid in 3 different directions, those are the lines that lead to the data collection points. So from the center of a grid, it reaches out to the 3 closest data collection points, and it pulls that rainfall data back into that grid to establish the rainfall for that day. Now, obviously, with this system, there are pros and cons. It could be that on any given day, all 3 or some of those rainfall data collection points receive rainfall, but no rainfall falls in the grid in the middle, the blue shaded grid. Well, on that particular day, the way that this system works didn't work very well for you. But it's also possible that you could have some of those periods of the year where you have a lot of spotty rain, and you could have a pop-up rainstorm that rains in the blue grid but doesn't rain in all, or maybe in some of the 3 data collection points. Well, on that particular day, you experienced beneficial rainfall, but you also did not get that rainfall counted against your total for the interval. So as you can see, it's a good system, but it's not perfect. And what we usually find is that over time, you find those imperfections benefiting you about as often as they work against you. And so in the average over the long haul, it ends up being kind of a neutral point that the system has its imperfections. And then back to the third point, let's just kind of use an example. For example, the first covered period for grass for the 2022 crop year would be January and February. January 1st, what happens is the insured acres are located by grid. Then the rainfall data is collected by reaching out to those 3 closest stations on January 1. And then a final rainfall total is established for January 1. You kind of repeat that process for the balance of January all the way through the end of February. So now you have a grand total for January and February for that interval. And that interval, so let's say for this example, that interval has a grand total of 1 inch of rain in January, February, which then compared to the historic normal for January and February. So again, for this example, let's say that's 2 inches. So you had 1 inch of rainfall out of a normal of 2. So you're at 50% of normal rainfall, which is lower than the 90% of normal rainfall that you insured against. So in that example, there would be a claim filed on your behalf. And the way that claim is filed is it's done electronically. There are no claims that you have to file, no claims that your agent has to file. There's no adjusters involved unless the claim is selected for a random or a compliance review, which could happen, but it's infrequent. So the fourth step is basically how the claim is filed. And then the fifth point was an example for the losses, paying the premium or paying part of the premium and how that works in the billing process. You'll see in this example, if your initial or your beginning premium was $10,000 and you'd had losses applied up to billing date of $7,000 from intervals where that rainfall was below 90%, then you would be billed for the balance due, which would be the $10,000 minus the $7,000 of losses. So on September 1, you'd get a premium bill for $3,000. Now that final payment is due on that invoice by November 15th in order to avoid possible crop insurance and FSA participation interruptions. But I'd also mention that you've got some of your coverage left. If you've scattered your coverage throughout the whole year, you still have some coverage left. And even if you pay that premium on September 1, there is possibilities. There's a number of ways that you could actually end up recovering that premium plus some additional losses if you have dry periods through the end of the year. Also, if you choose to wait until November 15th to pay the bill you get on September 1, you're free to do that. But the insurance company will assess a finance charge monthly on unpaid balances. So now we've answered the first question, why does it work? We hope we've answered the high-level questions about how does it work. And now let's tackle the question of how well have rainfall index policies been working. And we've got a chart that we'd like to show you in just a minute. But before we go to the chart, I think it makes sense to address a few things that we've found beneficial to point out. While there is some variation from county to county, all county results very heavily favor the producer's dollars at risk. It's just another way of saying that if you get in this program and stay in this program, it doesn't really matter where you're at within a county or what county you're at within a state or really what state you're at within a region. You're going to find that the premium dollars you put to work or that you put at risk work very well for you. Secondly, even though the history shows that the dollars at risk in this program provide a very predictable return, it is not impossible to overcommit funds to the program. Budgeting exposure is a critical element of doing this right. In other words, we don't want you to exchange losing sleep at night because of a drought and not knowing how you're going to make things work because of the drought to losing sleep at night because you overcommitted on your rainfall coverage and now you're concerned about how you're going to pay your premium. Those two things are both problems, and we want you to avoid both. So it's best to choose an acceptable maximum premium per acre for that eventual year when most of the 2-month intervals experience rainfall that's equal to or greater than historical norms. That doesn't happen often, but it does happen occasionally. And so we don't want you to find yourself in a tight spot because you bought too much insurance. And finally, by spreading the risk across the entire growing season, we can increase the long-term benefits of PRF. PRF works quite well, regardless of how the coverage is set up. But why would you settle for good results when you can have excellent results? We feel like our system of establishing that coverage works as well as anyone who is working in the rainfall index arena. So now let's take a look at the chart. And what this chart, excuse me, what this chart is designed to illustrate is how $1 put at risk would have performed in various places in the country over the past 20 years. Now, before we go through this chart, obviously, unless you're in Harper County, Oklahoma, this chart won't mean much to you. So we are offering to make this chart available to you and your county specific acres. All you need to do is get back in touch with us, call us or email us after this video is over, and we'll be glad to create this chart for your state and your county and get that information in front of you as quick as we can. So let's take a close look here and just kind of see what the chart is illustrating. You'll notice the first year that we're going to note is 2020 crop year. Obviously, 2021 isn't over, so the last complete data set we have is from 2020. And so in 2020, if you look in the second column, the amount at risk, if you had risked $1 per acre or $1 on your whole farm, doesn't really matter. There's no break point on cost for the more acres that you get or the more dollars you risk. So we just use $1 as an example. In 2020, the third column shows that there was $2.03 of total claims for the 2020 crop year. So the fourth column shows the net gain or loss. So when you had $2.03 of claims, that recouped your dollar at risk for premium and then returned an additional $1.03 per acre. 2019, just below there, you'll see that same dollar only pulled in 19 cents worth of claims in 2019. So you would have ended up, out of the dollar that you risked, you would have ended up paying 81 cents of the premium for the crop year 2019. And you can go down that line, you see 18, 17, and 16. You came out ahead, you made money on your PRF investment. 2015, it cost you a little, and on down the line through 2001. Bottom line is, out of the 20 years, there was 4 years that you would have paid premiums once all the losses were settled. And there were 16 years where the PRF policy would have been a net positive cash flow for you. So in terms of number of years that you paid premium, which is 4, and number of years that you collected losses in excess of your premium, which is 16, that sounds really attractive, but it's not impossible that you might have lost more money in those 4 years where it cost than you made in the 16 years where it made money. So the chart on the right is just made to put that more into perspective. I usually like to look at it as if you're putting together a toy train. You've got the red bars, which represent premiums paid. You hook those 4 red lines together and get a tape measure and measure them. That would tell you the total amount of premiums you had paid over the past 20 years. Then you hook that larger number of green bars together, which are mostly longer. You put those all together and get that same tape measure and measure your green line. That tells you how many checks you deposited because you were enrolled in the PRF program. It doesn't take a rocket scientist to see that it's extremely beneficial to have been in this program in Harper County, Oklahoma over the past 20 years. Again, I'd mentioned it's not going to look a whole lot different in most of the regions of the country. And we will gladly get you a copy of this same chart for your county and your state. For those that are a little more analytical, you can see the numbers down below the left side of the chart that give the return on premium risk, the return on premium paid, and an average return on investment. At 32% average return on the premiums that were paid, which is the investment in the policy, is an extremely good number in terms of ROI. Very few things we do in our operations would return 32% average annual return on money invested. So the risk that you have in this policy is rewarded quite handsomely when you look at that 32% average return on investment. So once again, I would like to say this is an illustration for one county in Oklahoma. As you move across the country and build these same charts for other counties and in other states, there will definitely be some variation. But when you get to the bar chart on the right side, you hook those red lines together and you hook those green lines together and you measure those and you look at the net result over a long period of time, then you'll see that they all fall in line with each other quite well, which means that the program is accomplishing exactly what it was designed to accomplish. So with that information in mind, we now would like answer the question, where would we go from here? You'll see two steps up there that you need to take. You need to determine a budget level that you're comfortable with, and you need to complete a policy application before November 15th, 2020, as it sets today. But we did just get an announcement and we're waiting to verify it. It appears that deadline to create a policy and report acres has been moved to December 1st. So we'll just have a little disclaimer there that this November 15th may be actually need to be December 1st. We'll check into that and we'll alter this video if that ends up indeed to be the case. So two things for you to do. Then there's some things your crop insurance agent needs to do. And this kind of plays back in the simplicity of the program. There's not a lot for you to do. There's quite a bit for your agent to do. They understand that, and we'll make sure that we get those taken care of. Would like to point out that you will not really be involved very heavily in the acres reporting process. We can get the information we need from the FSA directly from them in most cases. So very low input of your time in order to get involved with this program. So just kind of to recap, why does it work? It works because of the government subsidy. How does it work? It works because of the grids and the measuring and the electronics claims filing and the paying the premium towards the end of the period. And how well has it been working? I think when you see this chart and other charts very similar to this chart, you'd have to agree that it's been working pretty well. Probably well enough that each person watching this video ought to at least consider the option of adding PRF to your risk management strategies. And here's where we need to go from here. We need to get that done by the sales closing date, which we understand to be December 1 at this time. So who can you call? Well, you can visit us if you have more questions. If you have watched this video and you say, hey, I think I need to certainly be doing that, you can call us or you can email us at office@agdefenserm.com. And you see our phone number there at the bottom of that as well, 580-454-4367. We're an Oklahoma-based agency, but we have licenses and agents in many states. Most likely, if you're viewing this video, we have the ability to service you where you're at. So we would really enjoy hearing from you, visiting with you further, and assisting you in any way possible. Thanks for listening.